It's deck days at Lowe's, and the savings are stacked. Right now, pros get 15% off all in-stock composite decking from top brands like Trex, TimberTech, and Decorators. Plus, get a free DeWalt 20-volt max 5-amp-hour battery when you buy a select DeWalt tool. The deck's stacked in your favor with brands pros trust. Our best lineup is here at Lowe's. Valid through 4/22 while supplies last. Selection varies by location.
Welcome to Scott Fox After 9. Hey, I told you I was going to try and do a lighter episode today, and there will be some lighter content, but I got to be honest with you, there is a lot going on right now. There are some major scandals brewing, and I've got some great audio for you today. On this episode, you're going to hear from the U.S. Trade Representative commenting on what the difference is between Canada and the U.S.'s negotiation strategy when it comes to trying to get a deal done between America and Canada. You're also going to hear from Ontario Premier Doug Ford again. He is interjecting himself again into the trade war, insisting that he is not going to put U.S. alcohol back on the shelves. I'm also on this episode going to talk a little bit about housing. I've got more audio from Ron, the mortgage guy, Ron Butler. You're going to hear from him and more of his audio from his committee testimony the other day. And I'm going to start off today by talking about education. A big announcement made in Alberta. Here is Alberta Premier Danielle Smith.
Parents want their kids to learn how to read, to write, to do math, to code, maybe even get a trade, maybe learn a language. They don't want them to become social justice woke warriors. And I think we've seen a lot of ideology in the classroom in recent years. Parents have had enough of it. And I think the kids have had enough of it. I hear from high school students who tell me, why do I have to write my essay in a certain way? Otherwise, my teacher will mark me down. That's not what schools are for. Schools are supposed to teach kids critical thinking. And that means you hear multiple sides of multiple issues, and you help the child get through to figure out what their own views are and what they think is the truth.
Does anybody disagree with that? Alberta Premier Danielle Smith there talking about how she wants to take some of the indoctrination out of education. You may be surprised to know, particularly if you don't have kids in school, there seems to be an awful lot of it. I saw it firsthand when my kids were in school. A lot of social justice issues. And yeah, students can actually be penalized when they're being graded because of their particular opinion on certain social justice issues. And your opinion should never be up for grade. It should be the content of what you write. So that's an issue that Alberta is going to take on. I think that's a good common sense change. Meanwhile, in Ontario, they've now announced financial literacy is going to be a requirement to graduate. This is going to be part of the 10th grade curriculum. Students are going to learn the following: money management, creating and managing a household budget, and understanding income, expenses, and saving. They're also going to learn about saving and major life planning, saving for big goals like buying a home, planning for future financial needs. When it comes to investing, they're going to learn how to invest wisely and understand risk. Consumer awareness and protection. They're going to learn how to avoid scams and financial fraud. And finally, in the category of home economics skills, they're going to learn day-to-day financial decision-making and cost of living awareness. I think that's all great stuff, too. To be honest with you, I'm kind of surprised we weren't teaching that to begin with. I think that is essential information for someone as they're aging up through the school system and preparing to go out on their own. So I think that's a good change in Ontario. A different change, but also a good change coming out of Alberta. I think at the end of the day, parents just want to know that their kids are being properly educated with the things that they're going to need to know for later on in life. So I wanted to get that out there because, well, we do have a lot of doom and gloom kind of stuff happening around us. It's nice to know that there's some provinces that are focusing on education and they want to try and get it right. The other day, I played some audio for you from Ron Butler Ron, the mortgage guy. Ron's a funny guy. He's an older guy. He has got some real great takes, and he was invited to testify in front of the committee in Ottawa that was dealing with finances. And Ron is very well qualified to talk about issues surrounding housing. So I want to play for you a little bit of an exchange between him and Sandra Kobena, the member of parliament for Newmarket Aurora. Let's find out what Ron thinks about the housing market.
Why would we insist on people? You can't live in Burnaby anymore. You got to go away to hell and gone somewhere else. Okay, you can't do it because it's just too expensive, and it'll be too expensive forever. So that's my problem with the whole approach, is that more social housing is a great thing. Yes, people who have problems need housing, but it's not helping young people buy homes.
And it's interesting because there was a recent M&P Consumer Debt Index report that found that young Canadians are actually the most likely to feel financially paralyzed. Do you see that in your line of work as well?
Well, we don't see it too much because the truth is they've given up. They don't call a mortgage company. They know they can't get a mortgage. I mean, that is probably the most tragic element, is that we don't get those calls. We don't get the calls from young people who say, hey, I think I can buy this house in Vancouver. I can buy this house in Markham. I can buy this house in Oakville. We don't get the calls because they know they can't buy it unless they have massive parental assistance.
And you have 30 years of experience in the mortgage market. That's a good thing. What would be your recommendation for the government to better address the housing market problem that we have?
The recommendation is one that is unlikely to occur. It is to let nature take its course and continue to allow house prices to fall. And more than anything else, to find a way to re-energize investment in Canada, like for high-paying jobs, for better-paying jobs, and avoid any type of the wage suppression that which I don't think is the intention of the government, but it's certainly been the outcome that we've seen for the best part of a decade, is that there is a wage suppression that has gone on to the point where young people can't afford homes and middle-income people can't afford homes.
What do you think of what Ron Butler, the mortgage guy, had to say there? I don't know that I 100% agree with Ron. Ron thinks we should let nature take its course and let the housing market fall, let prices continue to come down, and he thinks eventually young people will be able to enter the market. And by the way, he's quite right. Young people simply cannot get in the market, and young people know they can't get into the market because it takes too much money for the down payment, and then the payments on the actual property are crippling in a lot of cases, and some of that has to do with interest rates. So what do? Let me put out my suggestion one more time. We need to build retirement communities. You should Google it if you never have. There's a place in Florida called The Villages. It's a massive area that is full of retired Americans. The entire place is filled with senior citizens. And in those communities, within the villages, they've got doctors' offices, they've got delis and bakeries and groceries, and they've got optometrists, and they've got dentists, and they've got everything that seniors might want. And people get a modest, small home. They get a little plot of land that they can call their own and maybe have a garden or some grass for the dog or something like that. They've got just the basics, and it's an affordable home. Do you know how much that would help the housing market if we incentivized senior citizens getting out of their big, massive homes and getting into communities where they're surrounded by people their own age and surrounded by services that old people want and need? Now, to do this, we would need to take over a massive area, probably at least one area in every province. In Ontario, that's the place that I've got the best knowledge of. I'm going to suggest an area like Flamborough. It's a big, massive area that's right in the middle of Waterloo Region, Hamilton, and Toronto. Build, baby, build. Build a ton of these prefab modular homes for senior citizens. Create an entire community. And once they start selling off their big homes, that's going to make the market a lot easier to get into for younger families. Good insight, though. I mean, this is a conversation that we can all have, and nobody, I don't think, has any idea what's going on with the housing market. Some economists are saying the market's going to crash. Housing prices are going to bottom out. There's others, though, that think housing prices are going to rebound and start going back up. Both of them have pros and cons. The pro would be, hey, there's a lot of people who have got their entire savings locked into their home. And if housing prices go down, so do their savings. It's not ideal. We're not supposed to be in that situation. Maybe that goes back to the financial literacy that they're going to start teaching in schools. People are not going to sell if they're going to lose a lot of money. They're not going to sell if they're going to be underwater on their mortgage. So we got to do something to clean the market up. Rapid fire. Let's keep going. Topic by topic. Yesterday, the Prime Minister was asked on his way into the House of Commons about the state of trade negotiations between Canada and the U.S. The U.S. has been talking a lot lately. Seems like they're losing their patience with us Canadians and how we negotiate. Here's what Prime Minister Carney had to say.
Well, should Canada make any more concessions to get to the table with the U.S., and how do you balance them giving you a list? And if you finish that list...
No, there is a, well, first thing, we have multiple levels of contact. We work through a series of issues. We understand what some of the, what the Americans would call trade irritants or trade issues are. We have some on our side as well. We're well prepared around those issues. We will sit down and work through those issues with the broader approach in the negotiation. We've made some counter proposals, which they're aware, and the time will come to really roll up our sleeves. But ce n'est pas le cas d'avoir un demandeur, un autre supplicant. C'est pas le cas de tout. Like, it's not a case of the United States dictates the terms. We have the negotiation. We can come to a mutually successful outcome. It will take some time, and we will take some time. Question.
Well, about the only part of that I can honestly say the Prime Minister is spot on is that it's going to take some time. Because we're not in a hurry to get things done. And by the way, don't just take my word for it. In a few seconds, I'm going to play for you the U.S. trade representative talking about how we're negotiating with America and what those trade irritants are that the Prime Minister mentioned. One more from Mark Carney.
More than that, Pierre Poilievre saying you need to explain your plan to Canadians on trade talks. He says you're showboating too much. You need to stop the YouTube videos.
When's he ever negotiated?
Did you catch that? The reporter was trying to ask the Prime Minister about criticism from opposition leader Pierre Poilievre that he's showboating and he's not really doing anything. The Prime Minister said, what's he ever negotiated? Okay, I mean, we could ask the same question of the Prime Minister. I mean, he's the guy who said he would negotiate a win for Canada, and here we are. He's been in office for a year, and there is certainly no win. But again, don't take my word for it. I always try and bring you the receipts, and that's what I'm going to do right now. The U.S. Trade Representative is named Jamieson Greer, and down in the U.S., they have committee hearings. Very similar to how we do in Canada. Well, Trade Representative Greer was being questioned yesterday, and it was a very interesting exchange. This one's a little bit longer. I may pause partway through, or I may just let it fly. This is what the Americans are saying. This is how the Americans see negotiations going between Canada and the USA.
I would just want to say thank you so much, Ambassador Greer, for being here and being so responsive to me and my staff. And as you know, the top trade issue in my district in northern New York 24, is the relationship between the U.S. and Canada. From tourism to agricultural markets, commodities to wine and manufactured goods, it's a huge issue. And Canada is a top market for my district. However, Canada has long discriminated against certain industries in my district, and that is what I want to focus on today. I got a couple of quick things, but let's start with dairy, and we've talked about this before. As you recall, probably my district is the 5th largest dairy producing district in the entire United States. For years, Canada has rigged their system to prevent U.S. dairy producers from fair access to Canada's markets. This year's National Trade Estimate Report, as every year's report details, Canada's market manipulation and unfair treatment of U.S. producers is still evident. The U.S. has fought for years to gain access to the Canadian dairy market, and yet Canada continues to violate USMCA and the spirit of its dairy commitments. Have you and your team raised these issues with our Canadian counterparts thus far, and have they been constructive in helping all of us resolve this issue with our friend to the north?
We have raised it repeatedly and frequently over the past year. Our Canadian counterparts have indicated as a general matter they're happy to talk to us about adjustments to USMCA and different things like that, but they have made no commitments on this front at this time.
Well, that's disappointing. So let's shift to wine, another issue detailed. Every Canadian province, with the exception of Alberta and Saskatchewan, has ceased distribution. Every Canadian province, with the exception of Alberta and Saskatchewan, has ceased distribution of U.S. wine and liquor products, including Ontario to the north. This is distorting the market, causing immense harm to our wine producers in the district. And have you and your team raised this issue as well with our Canadian counterparts, and have they been trying to help us? Have they been constructive in this issue, much like with the dairy issue?
Well, it's at the provincial level, right? So we hear from the federal government of Canada, well, it's the provinces, and then we do have two provinces who don't have this. That being said, I think we're kind of at the end of our rope in just asking for them to do this. Think about it this way. There are two countries that have retaliated economically against the United States in the past year, the People's Republic of China and Canada. So that's kind of the company that they're running in. So my sense is there may have to be an enforcement action to deal with this issue on wine and spirits in Canada.
Doesn't sound good, does it? Doesn't sound good at all. Hey, I know here, the way our news works, they try and create a very anti-American sentiment, and they've done a very good job. For the last year, they have convinced a lot of Canadians to hate America. Don't go there. Don't buy their stuff. It was a real assault from the mainstream media on the regular folks who didn't really have access to all of the information. Well, all of the information also includes this little detail. Canada's very protectionist. Supply management, especially on dairy, is a real issue that the Americans do not like. The fact that we took American alcohol off the shelves in Canadian liquor stores is a huge trade irritant. They don't like it. And by the way, in a separate committee hearing yesterday, Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, he mentioned the fact that America is not happy that alcohol got taken off the shelves here in Canada.
Last year, according to the World Travel and Tourism Council, the United States saw a 5.5% decline in international visitors. We were the only major economy to see any decline. In my home state of New Hampshire, tourism is the second largest industry, both by revenue, and it supports 70,000 jobs. Canada has long been our largest share of foreign visitors, but last year we saw a 30% drop in Canadian tourism, largely due to the loss of trust and goodwill because of this administration's rhetoric around Canada. Secretary Lutnick, last week you said about Canada's economic strategy, and I quote, "They suck." I believe your spokesperson then said this was about Canada's economy leeching off of the U.S. How does insulting our closest ally and neighbor help the businesses in my state of New Hampshire and states all across this country who are hurting because of the loss of Canadian business and tourism?
Canada's economy leans on the incredible $30 trillion economy of America. But
there's no doubt about that, Mr. Secretary. But insulting our closest ally and neighbor who provides a lot of business, we have a lot of businesses in New Hampshire, small businesses who work on both sides of the border. We have all those Canadian visitors who are not coming because of your comments and comments by the administration. How does that help our economy?
It is outrageous that Canada will not put U.S. spirits on the shelf. It is insulting.
It is.
And disrespectful to America that they won't
Absolutely.
even put...
And my husband has an interest in a company that has American spirits. And they won't do it because of the insults from this president and comments like yours. So I want to go on to another question.
But can I have just one small comment, which is dairy is treated so badly, and your state cares about dairy, and we are trying desperately to get them to live to the deal that they have on USMCA and stop treating our dairy farmers so poorly, and your state cares about that, and we are fighting for that.
We do, but we are not going to get agreement when we keep insulting people.
Okay, and that is a totally fair criticism. There's a lot of people on both sides of the border that feel that way. It's not necessarily that the U.S. is wrong when it comes to trade. It's how they're dealing with it. And their posture so far has been very intimidating. It's been threatening. They have been insulting at times. But even this person who seems to want a deal done to fix this with Canada, she is a Democratic representative from New Hampshire. Even she can acknowledge it is wrong that Canada banned U.S. alcohol because, of course, the Americans never did it to us. Let me play for you just one more from the U.S. Trade Representative, Jamieson Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So one thing, if you look at what's happened over the past few months, Mexico has taken some important steps to help get at this issue. There's much more to do. Mexico on its own has decided to raise tariffs on certain products from China and Vietnam and certain other economies. And this is because Mexico itself understands that it needs to be better aligned with the United States on trade policy to avoid the kinds of issues you're talking about, to avoid subsidized products coming in from Asia and elsewhere and undermining the North American market. So Mexico has already taken steps on this issue. We need to adjust the rules of origin. In Trump's first term, working with this committee, we adjusted rules of origin for automobiles, and that drove more investment in automotive production in the United States. We need to take that same model and we need to take it to other goods as well to make sure that rules of origin are robust and strong, to make sure that our manufacturers have an incentive and a comparative advantage relative to others.
So is Canada making any of those changes that Mexico has? Because one of the manufacturers I see in this room, in fact, his direct competitors are the Canadians, and it comes to defense equipment. So are the Canadians playing by the rules there?
A little bit on steel, they've done this, but overall they've indicated that they want to be trading more. They want to have more trade agreements with more countries. They're doubling down on globalization when we're trying to correct for the problems of globalization. So those are two models that don't fit together very well. I've had conversations with the Canadians. We're in regular contact, and we've talked about these issues. Again, there'd have to be a rule of origin put in place, and if the Canadians don't want to have the rule of origin, then we'll have to have some other border control to make sure that we aren't disadvantaged.
Okay, those are fine words there from Jamieson Greer. And let me just clarify what he said. First off, Canada is doubling down on globalization. The U.S. is trying to correct for the problems of globalization. So we have a fundamental disagreement on how trade should be done. He also indicated that what Mexico is doing is they're imposing tariffs on certain countries that are sending product into Mexico. And part of the reason they're doing that is so that their market, and by extension, the American market, can't get flooded with cheap Chinese goods or Indian goods or what have you. That's how the U.S. wants to see this done. Fortress North America. We are our own best customer collectively, the three of us. But if other countries want to have access to our market, it's going to have to get dealt with through tariffs and things like that. And if we don't go that route, there needs to be a serious look at rules of origin. Because, of course, a finished product could have parts from all over the world. And the U.S. wants to do the deep dive. It's a lot of work, no doubt. But they seem to want to do it. And it appears Canada does not want to participate. And why? Because Canada, as he said, is doubling down on globalization. We're the country trying to unite middle powers to go around the U.S. That's not going to fly. But I got to move on. Now you're caught up on the trade talks. That's the position from both sides. Yesterday, a special event was held. Laura Stone, great writer, by the way, from the Globe and Mail, was interviewing Ontario Premier Doug Ford. And the topic of booze, American booze, at the LCBO came up. Doug Ford clearly knows this is a huge irritant. And if Doug is totally aligned with Prime Minister Carney, which he does seem to be, he's not going to allow this U.S. alcohol back on the shelves, because if he doesn't, that's probably going to mean no deal.
What will it take for you to put that liquor back? And do you think that would help in the trade talks?
Well, I'd do it in a heartbeat, folks, but when he's destroying our auto sector, putting in jeopardy tens of thousands of jobs, actually the auto sector is 100,000, and we are going after our steel sector, our aluminum sector, our lumber sector, our dairy sector, and he expects us to sit back and roll over. You never roll over to a bully. You confront him head on. One of our tools One of our tools is alcohol. We're the largest purchaser of alcohol in the world, the LCBO. That's one tool. But isn't it great that we've seen great Niagara wines and other wines? The sales have gone up 70%, creating more jobs, more opportunities for Ontario workers. That's what we need to do. And once we get the deal done, which I'm confident, eventually we'll get it done, then we'll bring back maybe California red wine. You can sit down and have a glass of wine. I love my chocolate milk.
I would never.
You have a glass of red wine.
Okay. Premier Ford again treating the LCBO like it's his own and treating taxpayers like they're a bunch of children that can't make their own decisions. Taking the alcohol off the shelves. Keeping it off the shelves. This is a major trade irritant. This is specifically designed to get under their skin. It's a very popular male boomer opinion that you fight back against a bully. There's lots of things we could have fought back with. The Americans never banned our alcohol, and God help our alcohol providers if they ever do. If they ever say, I've had enough, now we're going to ban all Canadian alcohol from the U.S., that's going to be real tough times. Doug Ford is playing with fire here. Going on and on. Hey, this is great for the Niagara wine producers. I really don't think it is. Because I think people have just about had enough of being told what they can and can't drink. And by the way, the LCBO has never produced numbers this bad. There are, and all liquor stores, Canadians are drinking far less booze. That's a major cash cow for provincial economies. And nothing against Niagara wine. I know it's popular. I know there's people who like it. I hope it's always around. But forcing it on people, telling them you've got to drink it, it's your patriotic duty, I think that's just craziness from Doug Ford. Another crazy decision from Doug Ford. By the way, last night, in an effort to try and pass as quickly as possible Doug Ford's changes to the Freedom of Information laws, he held an evening session, late night. They were there late last night at Queen's Park to get this passed when Canadians were in bed or watching sports or doing something else and not paying attention. This is a government that had months off and then all of a sudden needed a nighttime session to pass the Freedom of Information changes. That's going to become law today when the House ratifies it. I think that's wrong. No proper scrutiny, buried into the budget bill. The courts have ordered Doug Ford to turn over his cell phone records, and he refuses to do it. I don't know how you can just blatantly ignore a court order like that, but Doug is going to do it, and now he's passed a law and made it retroactive so that he does not have to turn over those cell phone records that the court said he had to.
Now, at McDonald's, wake up to a $4 breakfast meal deal. Wake up to a sausage McMuffin or a sausage biscuit, to hash browns, and wake up to a hot coffee. Get your $4 breakfast meal deal.
Limited time only. Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher for delivery.
One more from Premier Ford. This is, I hope, the end of the jet debacle.
Why not keep the plane? Like, why was it turned around in one day that you came out and...
It's bad communications. I can announce we sold the plane for the same price right back to Bombardier and said, okay, you take it back.
And hopefully that is the last word on that plane. They've sold it back to Bombardier. But we still need to answer a couple of questions here. Like, how are we going to move the Premier around in the most cost-effective way possible? That's something that's going to have to come up. It's just today is not the day. Friends, recently you likely heard the federal government talking about how great they're doing at growing the numbers in the Canadian Armed Forces. Well, there might be some nuance to that. Just yesterday, possibly the day before, a couple of Conservative MPs came out in front of the House of Commons, and they talked about the Liberals' efforts to try and grow the Canadian Armed Forces.
I want to respond to the press conference that Defense Minister McGuinty gave this morning, and really want to deal with the illusion that the Liberals continue to try to create around the Canadian Armed Forces. The numbers that he was talking about on recruitment, again, is really all just a ruse. We know that Minister McGuinty came out to make this announcement on increasing recruitment numbers, largely based upon the Auditor General report that was being dealt with this morning at the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. We know for a fact that we continue to lag behind in the number of Canadian Armed Forces below authorized strength in both the Reg and Reserve Force. In the Auditor General's report, they talk about being over 12,600 members short. And at that time of the report, that number of those that were undertrained and undeployable stood at over 10,000. Today, that number has increased to over 12,000, as we heard at the Public Accounts Committee during testimony testimony from the Department of National Defense. We need to make sure that the Liberals don't get any credit for this. The mess that we have in the recruitment and retention crisis was created entirely by the Liberals through the lost Liberal decade, and only now have they started to take this issue seriously. We know that they continue to use only 80% of the recruitment capacity within the Canadian Armed Forces. We know that they continue to run short on the equipment required and the instructors to train up the next generation of those in the Canadian Armed Forces who are enlisting today. And also, in light of the numbers that he was glowing about earlier, still 83% of those who are enlisting to become a member of the Canadian Armed Forces are not being put through the system. Just over 16% is all that they have been able to actually attract and train.
Okay. Seems like the numbers may be a little misleading there. Something that somebody should look into. I will say, it is amazing how many ads I'm seeing trying to encourage people to sign up for the Canadian Armed Forces. Is there a threat that we don't know about? Because it really kind of seems like something's going on. We're preparing for war, and I'm not aware of any big imminent threat at the moment. Let's continue to move on. Couple of scandals I want to cover before I wrap things up for today. One of them is the PrescribeIT program. This is something I've talked about before. This is a program that was created with the simple goal of having doctors be able to electronically get a prescription to the pharmacy. And the Liberals spent tens of millions. It was actually hundreds of millions on this project. Should have been something simple. This should have been a real easy process. It should have cost, I believe by one estimate, 1/200th of what the government spent on it. That's what it should have cost, about $1 million to get this program done. Well, as it turns out, it didn't work. As it turns out, we had a program that was kind of doing that anyway, and then the government scrapped it. What about all that money that we spent on it, though? I want to take you to Ottawa. Committee hearing. This was, let me see if I can get this exactly right. TELUS Health that was talking here. They were summoned to the Health Committee after refusing to answer questions about the PrescribeIT software boondoggle. 100 million tax dollars were given to TELUS to deliver PrescribeIT. And now we've scrapped the whole thing and we've got nothing to show for it. Listen to some of this testimony. It's about 1.5 minutes long.
My first question, the $98 million for the program over 9 years, how much of the $98 million was used to create the 15% of the remaining IP?
I cannot disclose details and split that over.
You are in a
sense.
Parliamentary committee. And the benefit of this parliament, you have privileges. Should you not answer, you could be held in contempt. These are not difficult questions. I don't know why you refuse to answer them.
As I mentioned prior, there was an $89 million of base services and a $6.4 million for 59 approved change orders that were presented to us by Canada Health Infoway. So that is the breakdown if this is what you're looking for.
Outsourcing of jobs, how many?
This was a previously asked question. As I mentioned, I don't have the details in terms of outsourcing.
Can you provide those to the committee?
That will be part of the disclosure of information request as part of the agreement, and we were held by strict.
No. I'm asking.
We were held by strict considerations in terms of what can be hired and outsourced or not.
I'm requesting you to submit those to the clerk.
So this guy is clearly not cooperating here. By the way, asking the questions was Burton Bailey. He's the member of parliament for Red Deer. Why the secrecy? Well, actually, I think we know the reason for the secrecy. They wasted a total of $300 million on a program that never went anywhere. It was intended to digitize prescriptions. And then they scrapped the program, and we have absolutely nothing to show for it except a lot of questions about who got rich. $300 million. By the way, speaking of scams, let's talk about another one. Canada apparently is going to get into the space business. There was a call by Prime Minister Carney to decrease our reliance on the Americans. He wanted to be able to send rockets into space from Canada. So we created the spaceport, and I believe that is in Nova Scotia. Well, now some details are starting to come out about this spaceport program, and frankly, they're very, very, very concerning. We have a piece of dirt in Nova Scotia. That's right. It's basically a piece of dirt. There's a small concrete pad, couple of shipping containers, and a dirt road to get to it. That's Canada's spaceport. Now, the company who's running this spaceport, who, if I'm not mistaken, got $200 million from the Carney government within the last year, $200 million. They don't even own the land. They're leasing it from the province for $13,500 a year. $13,500 a year, just over $1,000 a month. They lease it from the province of Nova Scotia. Now, as part of this space program, they're leasing it to the federal government for $20 million a year. $200 million total. They're paying $13,500 to the province. The feds are leasing it from them for $20 million. This stinks of corruption. Completely top to bottom, left to right, it stinks of corruption. Why wouldn't the federal government just lease it from the province? Why would the federal government need to even lease it? If it's in the national interest, just take it. We need it. Expropriate it, if you will. Imagine that. We've got this small little upstart company with only a handful of employees that got a $200 million contract for something they pay $13,000 a year for. That's our spaceport. By the way, I'm not exactly an expert in this area, but I will say I've heard from a number of people that are. It's questionable whether or not launching things into space from Canada is practical anyway. See, what you want to do is be closer to the equator. That's why most of the American launches happen out of Florida. You can go straight up and then you can catch the equator and it gives you a little speed boost. In Canada, might be okay for getting us into certain altitudes, particularly over the poles. But it's not going to do much for regular space travel. So that's not what this spaceport is going to be. And frankly, I don't even care whether we do or don't launch out of Nova Scotia. It doesn't matter to me at all. I want to know how we ended up in a deal like that. Who signed that deal to pay this company $20 million a year to lease our spaceport property when it's really just a dirt road and a concrete pad? That's all that's there, and a couple of shipping containers, when they're leasing it for $13,500 from the province. Who's getting rich? Who approved that deal? Why are Canadians even having to think about this? We elect these people to go to Ottawa and spend our money responsibly, and that's the kind of stuff that's going on. Friends, boy, oh boy, before I get completely worked up, have yourselves a fantastic day. Tonight, the Raptors are playing Game 3 of the NBA playoffs. Go Raptors. Let's win this one and try and get back into it. Tomorrow, here on Scott Fox After 9, I will be doing some listener DMs. I've got lots of them already. If you really want something to make it on the show tomorrow, I can likely do it, but you got to keep it really, really brief. And I'll do my best to get that on listener DMs tomorrow. Thank you a million for checking out this episode. I appreciate you so much. Every day, this pod grows more and more and more in different parts of the country, and I am so proud to be doing it and proud to have you listening as well. Enjoy your day. I'll catch you right back here in less than 24 hours.
Marketing is hard. But I'll tell you a little secret. It doesn't have to be. Let me point something out. You're listening to a podcast right now, and it's great. You love the host. You seek it out and download it. You listen to it while driving, working out, cooking, even going to the bathroom. Podcasts are a pretty close companion. And this is a podcast ad. Did I get your attention? You can reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Libsyn Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a pre-produced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience in their favorite podcasts with Libsyn Ads. Go to libsynads.com, that's Libsyn, ads.com today,